Thank you. Good evening, Scrutiny Committee, and good evening, residents looking in on the broadcast. This is a meeting of the Scrutiny Committee on Thursday, the 5th of June, in the Walton Suite at Winchester at 6:30 p.m. Members, I need to advise you that the chairman of the committee, Councillor Brooke, has been unavoidably delayed, and in order not to hinder the proceedings this evening, I've spoken to her and she agrees that we should move to the appointment of a vice chairperson for the meeting, which will then allow the meeting to proceed promptly. So members, with your forbearance, I will ask Matthew, please, to take that item, and then the vice chair will join me and we will move to the full agenda. Matthew.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Members, can I have any nominations for Vice Chair for the committee, please, for 25-26? Yes, Councillor Pett. Is that seconded? Seconded. Have a very quick show of hands for Councillor Wallace then, please, members. Thank you very much. Councillor Wallace, would you like to take the chair?
Thank you very much, Matthew. We'll just give Councillor Wallace a moment to join me here at the top table. Thank you, members.
Right, well, thank you all for voting me back in for another year. Can't have been too bad last year. Right, so first of all, we start with apologies. So Matthew, have you got any apologies, please?
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. So we have apologies from Councillor Power, who's been replaced by Councillor Gordon-Smith, and apologies from Councillor Murphy. And obviously, as we said earlier, Councillor Brooke is running slightly late. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Moving to declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest to declare regarding items on the agenda?
Declare a non-pecuniary interest in being a non-executive director of Vendor Limited.
And similarly, non-pecuniary interest as a NED of Vendor Limited as well.
Super, thank you. I have my normal declaration as a non-pecuniary interest as my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. I've done item 3, so on to item 4. Right, so I've also got some chairperson's announcements to share. I have a few updates to share following up on actions from our last meeting. Firstly, on the Corner House, this relates to item 4 of the previous minutes where Councillor Wallace requested a further update. I understand that we also have a public speaker joining us this evening to speak on the Corner House. So I'd like to propose that after we've heard from the public speaker, that we invite Councillor Todd or Councillor Reach. Councillor Reach is here to respond to both the previous update request and any points raised by the member of the public. Secondly, on the annual community safety performance update. Under item 6 of the last minutes, there were several follow-up actions which I believe have been completed. The information from the local resilience forum was shared with members via email on 11th of March. Officers have committed to providing urban and urban-rural crime data splits in all future reports wherever possible. The figures relating to stop domestic abuse were circulated to members on 14th of March. Additional data on road safety and fixed camera speed enforcement was shared on 25th of March. Right. Third one is on development delivery plans on the central Winchester regeneration. Under item 7, from the last meeting, we had several actions. Officers have circulated the summary version of the development agreement that was presented to Cabinet when Jigsaw were appointed. Officers have advised that an update will be added to the council website following the public briefing, including key events and timescales. This will follow once Jigsaw's programme is finalised. We ask that the Cabinet member consider the points made regarding increasing the wider City Council SIL budget, and that the Cabinet member discusses with Hampshire County Council potential avenues for enhancing highways investment relating to the project. Would a Cabinet member have an update for us on those 2 points? If there isn't one, we can carry them over.
Sorry, Chair, I don't have an update, and Councillor Todd is unable to attend to that. So
That's fine. We can carry that. We can carry that one over. Thank you. Next. Still not updated, is it? Okay, right. Thank you. Q3 performance report follow-ups. So there's 3 points here. We agreed to arrange a follow-up meeting with a small group of members to review the KPIs used in these quarterly reports. That group met in April, and when we get to item 7, the Q4 report, I'll ask Councillor Cutler to introduce the report as normal, and then I'll ask Councillor Wallace to provide a brief update on the discussion that took place. We also agreed that officers would arrange a follow-up meeting to explore the issues raised around public toilets. I understand that officers are keen to progress this task and finish group, and are proposing a cross-party group of 5 members of this committee to meet with officers to discuss. Can I have nominations from members for this, please? So 5 people for a task and finish group on around public toilets. So Councillor Laming, Councillor Clear, Councillor Pett, Councillor Bolton, and should we ask if the chair wants to do it when she arrives?
It's your call. We can wait for the final space if you wish.
Thank you. Thank you. Finally, we have asked officers to consider a member briefing on nutrient neutrality, following a question from Councillor Power. I understand that some actions have already been taken, including updates to the public website on nitrates and phosphates. I also understand that Councillor Porter, Councillor Power and officers are due to meet soon to discuss this further. Unfortunately, Councillor Power isn't with us this evening, but I will ask her if she could update us on that point at a future meeting or by email. So that's it for the announcements. So on to the next bit is minutes of the meeting of the... Yes.
can I just reflect on the information that was provided by Chief Inspector Bishop? I don't believe it actually met the requirement that we asked, which was actually to understand the speed issues in our localities. She provided a list of totals for months and then a list of locations that those actions were taken. It doesn't actually give the granularity of actually where issues of speeding is taking place in the district. So I'd just like to put on record that I'm not happy with the level of information that we've been provided in that report, and would ask for further information to come to this meeting at a subsequent occasion. And also, in terms of the actual report, I think we were asking, I certainly was asking for that information to be included into the next community safety review. And that wasn't then committed in the actual, presentation that we had. So I'd just like to put those on record at this meeting. Thank you.
Matthew, you captured that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's fine. I'll take that forward with officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we move on? Councillor Pett.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Related to what Councillor Bath has just said, actually, if this committee is sitting in that respect as the Crime and Disorder Committee for Winchester City Council, which from Councillor Brooks' report it seems we are, then I think it behoves the police to give slightly better answers to our questions, and our questions need to be recorded in a rather more comprehensive way to ensure that we actually get the data that we've that we've asked for. I have similar concerns to Councillor Batho over the question I asked about the average speed schemes on the A272 and A32. It's an issue of great import to certainly my residents in Upper Meon Valley. It's a question I'm repeatedly asked in parish council meetings. How effective are those things? We got a very bland response after the last meeting. I wonder if we could perhaps have a slightly more formal review with the constabulary as to how that annual event is conducted in front of scrutiny.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Indeed, Councillor Pett, you are correct. This is the committee responsible for the review of the Community Safety Partnership, and an annual report is produced and co-delivered, as was at your last meeting, between our council officer and the police. Committee have previously asked for an update and adjustment to the information that is provided to you. As with any organisation, there may be limits to the information that is available to you, either in public or whether it is recorded in the form that you would wish. However, if committee wish, then I'm sure through Matthew we could have a conversation with our council colleague who leads the community safety work to ensure that perhaps the report better meets your needs for the coming year. Absolutely happy to take that away and pick that up with colleagues concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Right, any other points on the announcements before? Okay. On the minutes, so I know there's been a point raised here on clarification about some of the actions, how we caught the actions, but I had my point actually on the corner house. I didn't think was, it wasn't sure that was entirely captured correctly on the minutes either, but we seem to have the actions going forward. So because of that, are we okay on the minutes, or do you think we need to?
To assist, Chair, the minutes are presented and they are for accuracy. So if a councillor wishes to make an amendment to the minute, they need to put an alternative phrase into the committee and the committee needs to agree that. I would remind you, of course, that the minutes are just that, a minute of key actions. They're not a contemporaneous record of the meeting. Clearly, we have the webcast, which we can check back on. But if there is a point of accuracy that a member wishes to raise, they can raise it this evening and seek a clarification.
Right. Well, I had
Thanks.
one that we seem to have picked up as an action, but we don't seem to have minutes. So it was at the. We've got an ongoing action that was raised at the 4th of February Scrutiny Committee meeting on item 6. There was an action on Councillor Todd to provide an update on the procurement process associated with Corner House and whether there'd been any changes made. That action isn't shown on the minutes from last meeting, so for correctness, that it should be added, I believe. Do I have a seconder for that? I guess.
Sorry, Chair. Just to help a little bit, I think that action is captured on the previous set of minutes under item 4. It refers to that because you were querying at the March meeting. You were querying the accuracy of the February minutes.
Yeah.
And so it's captured under item 4 of the March minutes. So there's a reference in the March minutes that you raised a query at the March meeting regarding the February minutes. Sorry if that helps.
Yeah, no, I did see that there, Matthew, but that refers to the HRA budget. It's on something completely different. Yeah, it was on Corner House, and if you look at item 4,
the members' debate on the Corner House was part of the HRA discussions at the February meeting. So I think Mr. Tate raised it in public participation, and the committee members continued that discussion on the when they got to the HRA paper.
Okay, on that basis, I'm happy to
No problem.
forget that one because we've got the action as well. Thank you. Were there any other corrections to the minutes that needed? No. Okay. Super. Then I will sign those off. Okay. Right. On to item 6, which is public participation. Can I ask Mr. Quentin Brooke to come forward, please? You'll have 3 minutes when you start speaking, and there'll be a timer on the screen to show the remaining time. But it's all right. Just settle down. We'll only start the timer when you start talking. So it's just tea time.
In early 2020, prior to COVID, WCC Cabinet signed off on the purchase of the corner house without a supporting business case and at risk of its conversion to flats not getting planning approval. Mr. Tate highlighted this financial mismanagement to the February meeting of this committee earlier this year. In response, Councillor Todd told this committee that the council are now much better at requiring a business case before planning applications, and said regarding the purchase of the corner house, I'm sure there was a business case at the time. I'm very happy to come back to you with a bit more detail as to how the original decision was taken. Councillor Brooke responded, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Wallace followed up more specifically, saying it would be good to understand if we have a process for having a business case when properties are purchased. To which Councillor Todd responded, of course we do, and I would be amazed if we didn't do that at the time. I mean, we would have done it at the time because that's always been the policy of the council. It wouldn't have been a sound decision otherwise. To all of this, Councillor Brooke responded, thank you, Councillor Todd. I've put that down as an action for us to note. Despite all of that, the minutes of that February meeting only required Councillor Westbrook, not Councillor Todd, to review the points raised regarding the corner house and, if required, provide further feedback to the committee. There was no mention of Councillor Todd's commitment to come back with more detail as to how the original decision was taken. At the next meeting in March, Councillor Wallace quite rightly raised this when the committee was asked to approve the February minutes, saying that it was his understanding that the action noted was on Councillor Todd to return to the committee and report out on what he had found. Councillor Brooke, however, then disagreed that it had been an action. So it was agreed not to amend the February minutes, but to add an action to the March minutes, which I can't see. Councillor Todd subsequently arrived at the March meeting and the committee did not use the opportunity to follow up with it. So my comments and questions today are, 1, when is the Scrutiny Committee going to properly scrutinise this situation so that the concern raised by Mr. Tate can be properly understood? I.e., was there or wasn't there a business case supporting the council spending £500,000 on the corner house? If there is no effective system for this committee to follow up on its actions, then it's too easy for councillors to defer their responses, knowing that they will be just lost in the history of actions and minutes. 2, the corner house debacle stems from a rushed decision to spend £500,000 of public funds without a business case, which was also approved by the entire cabinet without any challenge. Surely this committee's role is to establish if and how that happened so that similar risks and wastage can be prevented in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke. Can I ask you to put off your mic? Yeah, that's it. Brilliant. Thank you. Yes, I sympathise with a lot of what you said. I think hopefully you've heard that we've just been trying to track down where it is in the minutes and try and make sure it is followed up on. And I believe we've got the right action now to make sure that that is completed. So thank you for raising this again. Thank you. Can I ask Mr. Tate to come forward, please? You also have 3 minutes, and I know you know how it all works.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the Scrutiny Committee. I wish to raise the issue of a grant of £90,000 paid to the Winchester Housing Group, known as Keystone, back in 2017. The grant was agreed on the 20th of April 2015 by way of a portfolio holder decision notice 613 to assist Keystone to convert their offices in St John's Road into 4 self-contained move-on units, which would be let as low support accommodation to previously homeless households who no longer required intensive support. In the portfolio holder decision notice, the reason for supporting the grant was stated as the new accommodation will be let to previously homeless households who have low support needs via nominations from the Winchester Supported Housing Panel. It will provide modern, attractive accommodation that would be fit for purpose as move-on accommodation, of which there is a significant shortage in the district. The grant came out of Section 106 Developers Funds. For some background, Keystone was set up in 1989 by a number of local churches to provide housing for homeless single people in Winchester, and amongst others was supported by the council by way of a number of interest-free loans and grants. In 2014, Keystone was effectively taken over by Bournemouth Churches Housing Group. The rationale was that BCHA had around 1,000 properties in Hampshire and Dorset and could manage the Keystone Winchester properties and tenants more efficiently. Keystone only had 30 or so tenants. Subsequently, BCHA decided to withdraw completely from Winchester and also from Hampshire, and so they have liquidated all the £2.5 million worth of Keystone assets transferred to BCHA when they took over the charity, other than the 4 flats in St John's Road. The flats are now up for auction at the end of June. And my question is, will the £90,000 grant be repaid to Winchester, or will these funds be lost and used in Bournemouth? I'm not questioning the decision to give the £90,000 to Keystone, but surely there ought to have been some clawback provision. Essentially, it seems to me that money raised from Winchester residents is being used to support people in Bournemouth, and the 4 one-bed flats will be lost, which is the tragedy, from the affordable housing provision in Winchester. If the council were to make similar grants in future, would they look to ensure there were conditions or a clawback of any grant given? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Councillor Cutler or Councillor Reach, are either of you in a position to respond to one or either of those comments just now? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Tate. I agree with Mr. Tate on this. I can't comment as to why this was structured in the way it was in April 2015, long before my time. It does seem surprising that there was no mechanism to claw back money that was given from the council. I understand that there is an element of the money that will be clawed back because of a commercial mortgage arrangement that we have on 44A St John Street that's expected to be of the order of around £35,000. That's falls far less than the 90,000 grant. As to Mr. Tate's second question about whether we would ensure such conditions were placed in future grants of this nature, I think that was a perfectly sensible thing to do, and I'll certainly look to take that away so that we would avoid this happening again.
Thank you. And also, do I open the floor then for comment on the committee? Thank you. On Cornerstone, are you able to answer that one as well, please?
On Corner House, I think, with respect, Chair, yes, I can answer. I think the questions were largely, for Mr. Brooker, were largely around process and procedure as to how this committee interacts with the rest of the council. How does the scrutiny work? If there are specific questions about that, about the corner house itself, we have a paper going to Cabinet in a couple of weeks' time, but I think the questions were really around how this committee goes about its work of scrutinising the decisions of the council, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, I'm not quite sure that's correct. I mean, it was very useful that Mr. Brooke repeated back what we'd heard in that first meeting, and Mr. Todd took the action to bring the business case back to this committee, and also the process for creating that business case to ensure that, you know, if there are issues with that business case, you know, whether we've learned the lessons. So I think both of those are still there, I believe.
While I can't give you the full details of how that decision was taken, if you look back at the minutes of the Cabinet held the 11th of March 2020, there is the paper which I think covers that. Paper 10, Housing Revenue Account Property Acquisitions. Now, I can spend a bit of time looking through it and getting you the information, but or we could make sure that the questions that are asked by this committee are answered at the next Cabinet committee.
I think that's probably better use of our time. At which committee are we going to report this back at?
Sorry?
Are you going to come back here to the scrutiny, or?
What I was saying is that the paper is publicly available, so
yeah.
Scrutiny members could go through it, so you can have more detail about your questioning of that procedure, because the procedure was there. What I need to do is spend a little bit more time looking at it, and we could report back to your question, which was about the process, wasn't it? About whether there was a business case at the time.
Yes, there were two parts. There was one, was there a business case, which
I think we can say.
Secondly, around the process.
Yeah, and the papers are there. So until I haven't had an opportunity to go back. Well, I've just looked it up, given that we were having the conversation, and have found the paper, but I haven't had time to go through all the details of it yet. And it's obviously, as I say, it's the paper in.
I think to make best use of our time, I think that yes, if you could bring it back
March 2020, but I think
can we bring it back to the next scrutiny meeting, please?
For those that are asking the questions, it may be worth them going back and reading that paper first to see if that satisfies them anyway, because the papers are there as to when that acquisition took place.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Is the broader point here not that there's an inaccuracy in the minutes, and how then we are diligent at getting answers when people, and in particular the leader here, has promised to come back with the business case and has not? And so I think the broader point here that is being raised is we need to have more teeth to get these things done. And that is what needs to happen. That's what we need to resolve. How we're going to do that is my view. Thank you.
I'd like to take up from where Councillor Bolton was going with that. I think reflecting, and I've only just sort of looked at it now back at the minutes, it's not necessarily clear from the minutes as to whether the committee is actually asking for things to come back to it. We have in the minutes a list of things that were discussed. I think maybe if it were made clearer and there was then an action put on others to come back to the committee, it would then make it clearer what the committee was requesting. So I think that's where it may be that it's sort of left with one potential view being that there is a request being made, and from the other perspective that there's only sort of a indication that the committee would like to hear about it. So I think it may just be that we need to be clearer and actually have elements in the minutes that actually there are items that are going to come back to the committee and that they are then put onto the agenda. So it makes it quite clear to Cabinet members, if they've been asked to do that, that there is a specific request and there's a specific topic and item on the agenda to then answer to.
So that would be my suggestion, is that I think there's just a clarity that we need to make sure that we've actually got that on the agenda.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both for that. I think that point is noted. And we'll look forward to seeing how it's captured in the minutes from today's meeting. Right, moving on. Let's see, Mr. Brooke, you're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to go. It's entirely up to you. Item 7, Q4 finance and performance monitoring. Right, so recommendation, the recommendation is that the Scrutiny Committee raises with the Deputy Leader or relevant Cabinet member any issues arising from the information in this report. So I'll ask Mr. Councillor Cutler to provide an introduction, and then I will provide an update from the KPI subcommittee meeting, and then we'll get to committee questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the final quarterly report for the year to March 2025. So it's Q4 report based on the format that was introduced at the beginning of the financial year, and follows that same format of the 6 sections of covering the themes of the council plan, which sort of shows both delivery and KPIs. Since the Q3 report, we've added a section on the highlights of the Tier 1 River Park Cricket Pavilion project, and the report has been updated to include a quarterly highlight report for the Housing Compliance Tier 1 project. I'm happy, therefore, to take questions on this report after you've given your update on KPIs.
Right, thank you, Councillor Cutler. Right, as members are aware, we had a subcommittee meeting on the 14th of April to review the proposed KPIs for the coming year. It was we had a good selection of people from across this committee, and the meeting looked at each priority area on the council plan. In terms of KPIs, 2 minor changes to KPIs were accepted by the officers, and it was agreed that officers would investigate 2 new potential KPIs, a KPI on measuring greening and biodiversity, and a KPI on planning enforcement, although that second one might end up being reported out to a different committee. Other suggestions for KPIs were discussed, but rejected by officers. Additionally, it was agreed that the source or basis of the annual KPI targets would be included with the first quarterly performance report. One of the issues that got mentioned was that we don't always, it's not always clear where how some of those goals have been set, and so we've got agreement that in the report that we will see at the next scrutiny meeting, because it's the Q1 report, officers, that will include more detail on how those goals have been set. That's a real positive improvement. There was also we also took an action on the Scrutiny Committee to consider using scrutiny meetings for periodic in-depth reviews of key service areas or council policy priorities and policy objectives. Similar to the deep dive we did on council assets back in December, the idea was to be expanding to other areas and potentially using these sessions to refine the KPIs that we're capturing in those meetings. There was lots of discussion in the subcommittee meeting about the KPIs, but at the time it was felt that the KPIs that we had were sufficient, but I think there was a lot of feeling that maybe there was some opportunity for improvement, and I know there's been some subsequent communications on this as well. But one way around it might be if we set up these kind of deep dive sessions, as well as getting into the subject matter in a bit more detail, then we can also look at refining some of the KPIs. So they were the two key bits. So if on that second one, if we're looking to do those deep dives, that might affect how this committee, the forward plan for this committee, and what we look at. But I don't suggest. I was going to suggest actually we don't talk about that today. We'd actually just postpone. I was going to propose that we postpone setting a forward plan until we've had a chance to discuss this offline with officers, to make sure that we're not proposing something unreasonable. So I don't know if anybody had any questions about that or any comments. Hopefully I've captured it reasonably accurately what happened at that subcommittee, but if anybody wants to add any comments, now's your chance. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Bolton.
So I agree entirely with that. I think it was all too brief an experience, and I think we all felt that further work needed to be done. We needed to have more of a conversation about some of these areas. And I initially went into that meeting thinking, yippee, we're going to sort it all out now. And subsequently, I felt that actually we do need to do each of these areas in a bit more detail, and actually have an agreed framework around what we're trying to achieve with those KPIs, because I think there's some differences in definitely people's minds as to the purpose and effect of those KPIs. And I think if we nail that down and we all agree that going forward, and that we then revisit these areas in detail, I think that would be of huge benefit, because I think there's a lot of room for improvement. Thank you. Oh.
Councillor Batho.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Wallace, for reviewing the meeting that we had. Subsequent to that, and actually as a sort of preparation for this meeting, I actually went back and looked at the other quarters that we've had reported back in the last year. And one of the things that I reflected then that we lose by having a set of reports which are specific about one quarter is any sense of continuity about what's happened in the previous ones. So I'm just wondering if we could have, in some ways, reflect what the current sort of progress is at a high level. So in terms of the red, amber, green status, if the bars were broken up so that we could actually see the previous sort of 2 or 3 quarters and see what the actual sort of trajectory of a particular sort of area is. I think it may incur, and I can understand that there would be some additional effort to start with that, but once it's set up, it would then be a case of rolling it on, because in going back, you can see that some of the items, some of the KPIs are sort of at amber for a period of time, and they, though reported, when they change from one state to another. So in a particular meeting, we'll actually get a report when one of the KPIs changes from green to amber or amber to red. What we don't see is that whether that KPI has been amber for the last 4 to 5 months, or sorry, 4 to 5 quarters. And I think that would actually be of use to the committee in terms of understanding what the current progress is. So it was just a request that we could investigate, having some sort of indication of what the actual performance is over a period of time.
Mr. Taylor. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair. If I can assist just on that point, I'm looking at the report, which is the New Star report, which we agreed was an improvement on the previous, much more discursive. approach and enabled this committee and indeed cabinet to review progress against a series of targets. So you can see, members, and this is for the benefit of people listening in, there are key projects which are lifted directly from the council plan, and they are tracking progress against those plans and whether they are red, amber, green to achieve delivery date on the as set out in the report. So that's one piece there. But Councillor Batho, I think you're talking about the more of the performance indicators, and they come in two forms, one of which is a long range tracker, and they are shown on an annual basis because they may be matters, and I'd have to be looking at the council total market based emissions, for instance, and they are shown on an annual basis. And then below that we have a real-time measure, which is the one which we're using to agilely and swiftly review and put attention to correction if needs be on a quarterly basis. And they are shown there on a quarter, Councillor Batho, but what I think you're asking potentially is for the quarterly blocks to be coloured red, amber, green. So you could see, for instance, percentage of household waste sent for reuse and recycling. You don't know, we don't know whether 36.1% in Q4 23-24 was red, amber or green against the target, because the quarters are there. But I think what you're asking for is to see a trend on whether they've been consistently yellow and we haven't addressed it, or there was a red and there was an improvement. Is that what you're asking? Because otherwise the trend is there. Go on.
Just my apologies, sorry. I was actually talking about the higher level ones in terms of the sort of status against the so if we look at page 19, where it's got the carbon neutrality action plan, we've got the RAG status there for timeline and budget as being green, and for carbon of being amber. What was the RAG status last quarter? And what I'm saying is that if we knew that, and if we actually had some idea of what it was for the last 2 quarters, for instance, then it might actually give sort of more indication as to whether an issue is a sort of short term or it's been around for a long time. I suppose it's then the question, and it comes back to that question about the KPIs, is what are the triggers for then going from amber to red? Because if one of them is actually that it's been amber for three quarters or whatever, then or if it has been amber for 3 quarters, would it be actually now red? So I suppose I'm just trying to sort of give more information, because otherwise, as a committee, we see the quarter that we're viewing, but we don't then, unless you go back and actually do the work to sort of review the previous quarters, you don't have it in a concise form in the actual report that you have in front of you.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Batho. Okay, so there are 2 different categories of RAG status here, because the ones that are on the narrative piece, for instance, on page 19, our carbon neutrality action plan for the district, the timeline for that is to 2030. So therefore, that is showing as amber for a 2030 timeline. So I think it would be unlikely we could get that to green before near the end of that, because we don't know that we've put enough in play to do that. But we could certainly add, if you wished, Councillor Cutler, the previous quarter's RAG status on that discursive piece. But you're not talking about the bit which I just explained, which is the more detailed ones. But those are about, so and on the more detailed ones, the trigger for amber is 5% off target. For these discursive ones, they are project is underway, need to keep an eye on it. It's not a fail, but we can certainly add those definitions on if helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Cutler.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that below that status that there is a status update, a written status update every month, which, if it's changed, it will say that it has changed. I take your point about whether it's not changed, but then it's how far back do you go? I would have thought an alternative is to put an up arrow, a down arrow, or a stayed the same next to it. But I don't think anything gives a solution of how long it's been amber, because you can go back 2 months, but it might be 6 months, unless we actually have it in the written aspect of it, because, you know, in the example being used here, well, no, I was looking at the next one, the future of waste and recycling. It says the timeline RAG status in bold has been changed to amber to reflect this uncertainty in the description. So I think it's all there, but it's just a matter of, I think it's mainly your point about the long-term thing, and I'm not sure if arrows or even putting last month's makes a lot of difference there. The changes are highlighted in the report. Yeah, we'll look at options for that, and if you think of any more as well between now and the next report as a way of doing that, we can sort of talk to Simon about what might be possible.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, Laura, great idea actually, the changes to the detailed ones. So unfortunately, you should join us on the subcommittee to review. On page 19, should the timeline be read, given what we've just discussed? If not, I'd love to know why not. And it might be a simple answer that you think actually, although it's delayed, it is going to be within time, and maybe that therefore should be amber, like the carbon. But also, I was just going to say, I think this brief discussion was exactly the sort of things that we want to do in a bit more detail by having these, you know, these sessions and get them in the work, the future work plan, and go into them, you know, with Councillor Cutler in more detail and try and iron out some of those issues that we've felt that we've had with them, and try and improve them where we can. Thank you.
Do we have any further discussion on the KPIs meeting, other than it sounds like we probably need a follow-up?
Well, that was an impression I had. I think Councillor Wallace was suggesting that if there were some programmed deep dives by this committee that came up with some suggestions or improvements, then that in itself, that was the process to follow, rather than another meeting. We really do need to, for consistency, set them for this year. But if there's discussion, that there can be tweaks through the year. But another meeting to review them again will mean that the Q1 one will be different from the Q2, etc. So I was under the impression that it was the deep dive element in areas that you think might not be good enough, and then coming up with something else from the Scrutiny Committee as a suggestion. But it's up to you, Chair.
A deep dive meeting, Councillor Cutler, would be a task and finish group, and the last meeting was supposed to have been a task and finish group, and sounds like it wasn't very successful. So, which is why I'm suggesting a follow-up, because the deep dive piece would be a task and finish group. Councillor Wallace?
Sorry, I think you. I think you missed. I think you joined partly through. So I think the idea of the deep dives was really deep dive into a particular area, for example, into the business aspects, and spend. Sometimes at these scrutiny meetings, we don't have enough time to really kind of dig into the level of detail that would be appropriate for us to enable us to do proper scrutiny of a particular area. So the idea would be to focus on, for example, the business aspect, the business bit for potentially at the next meeting, and as part of that discussion, digging into the details and digging into it a bit more. There might be so that there's some KPI suggestions come out of that meeting for new KPIs going forward. Rather than, so instead of spending a lot of time getting exactly, working very hard on the KPIs, we instead put more effort into actually into periodic deep dives into particular areas.
Okay, that makes sense. So do you have a proposal for which area would be looked at the next scrutiny meeting?
I think we need to have a discussion with officers about that to make sure it's something that's reasonable, and that unfortunately that discussion hasn't taken place yet. So I think we need to do that offline and come back to you. But hopefully we can agree something and if and get it agreed before the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Ms Taylor?
Thank you. If I can assist, thank you, Councillor Wallace. That's helpful. I think we're using multiple phrases to describe the same piece of work. If there is an area of work that the committee wished to explore, for instance, the committee decided it wished to look in more detail at fly tips, and indeed Councillor Cutler hosted a meeting, a task and finish group, 1 or 2 hours, to look at that in more detail, and then the reports were reported back. If we're describing that we can accommodate, and we've discussed before, we can accommodate a modest number of those throughout the year. So you would have to be really selective about the areas that you looked at. A deep dive, as in a long piece of longitudinal work, would really start to limit the number of pieces you could look at if you were intending to do, you know, several months of work on something. And I would just say to you members, you need to choose really carefully and deploy your valuable resources in addition to our officer team on something that needs improvement, rather than just an exploratory piece. The fly tips work, you absolutely said this wasn't good enough. You wanted to understand the process, and we did that in an hour offline and then brought that back. And you can see in here you have a regular, more regular in-depth report on that. So clearly, Chair, you have a busy committee already. So I think it would be, unless you were to change some of the items you were taking, you don't probably have very much time to do all of that in public. So a task and finish group approach may suit you, but it is absolutely your call, Chair.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Laura, for clarifying that. That helps, because I think it frames what we're trying to express in terms of how you can actually deliver on those things, which is important. And to my mind, how I was thinking about this, and I'm open to be persuaded otherwise, is that we start by clearly framing and understanding what we're trying to achieve and what the overriding purposes of the KPIs for each of the areas that we're measuring, and then do a task and finish couple of hour meeting, as you say, Laura, not months of, you know, spinning it out, on each one of those key areas, like you know, the economics of Winchester, like the, you know, net zero, our carbon neutrality action plan for the council or for the district, and focus on those specifically, and pulling in all those suggestions that have been sent in, working at that meeting with officers to understand what is possible and what is practical, to give the picture that we feel needs to be represented in those KPIs. That's my understanding and what I'd like to see happen if that, I hope that's clear.
Sorry, Councillor Bolton, I heard what you're saying, but in my head you're saying it's still about deep diving into a particular area to see what KPIs we need in order to monitor that better going forwards. Have I misunderstood what you were saying there?
Yes, picking each of those areas and spending and using that as a task and finish, you know, meeting that we're prepped for. We know how we are conducting that meeting and what it's to deliver, and that we are clear that that is to focus on one particular aspect of it, one area, one set of KPIs, rather than trying to, you know, boil the ocean in 1 2 hour meeting, and that we have a number of those throughout the year to focus on those as 2 3 hour task and finish approaches, rather than that, you know. Does that make sense, Laura? Sorry.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I understand. And members, my job here is to is to absolutely help you do the best job you can as the Scrutiny Committee, which is to provide constructive challenge to the Cabinet in order that we can deliver the best possible services. And I would say to you that you're really focusing on the KPIs. I think it might be, if I may suggest, you might want to look at it as a package, because we've distilled already from the council plan a set of key activities which show progress against the key themes in the council plan. So you could, if you wish, look at those and decide it's a different action you wish to track instead of adopt an air quality strategy. You may wish there's another one, choose a different one. So we could swap one in or out, absolutely, but they are absolutely tracking progress on the council plan. And we then have our long range trackers, which are usually limited by availability of data. So I'm looking at the carbon ones, they're super complicated, and then we have a selection of data that is available to us that is not data from someone else that we're just pasting in, but truly reflects the actions that this council has taken as the quarterly measure. And members are invited every year to comment on those, and we can absolutely do what Councillor Bolton's suggesting, Chair, but that output would then come to Cabinet to either agree or not. So I don't want you to focus on changing a KPI when your energies might be better on focusing, are we really pushing at the limits of what we can do for this area of the council plan? If you want to focus on KPIs, that's one thing, but it's whether you want to work on, are these the right things for us to be doing to achieve that council plan outcome? But we can do either. We can take it whichever way, but the KPIs would have to be changed by Cabinet.
So herein lies the problem. One moment, Councillor Pett, is that we only have a limited number that we can do in a year. So you can't do in 1 month a task and finish group to look at the KPI and then a separate task and finish group to look at the strategy and how that's progressing. There wouldn't be enough staff time, would there? Yes,
I think it would be difficult.
It would be, because going round this, we've been round this quite a lot of times between us, haven't we? And what we're going to look at. So there's only a finite amount of availability of the officer time to us. So that's why we need to be selective about the exact purpose of task and finish groups and how that will benefit the services and the public that we are providing for, rather than just the measures of that, if that makes sense.
All I can respond to that by saying is we need to take this offline then to work out how we're going to resolve this, because it's we've all got different ideas here by the sound of it. And we're limited by resources, and I understand that,
Councillor Pett, you just wanted to comment there.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to where we started on all this discussion. And I think, as the Chief Executive pointed out, there are at least 2 different sorts of information here. I'm looking at the main programme RAG statuses. And it's quite true to say that if you read the RAG status update, yes, it explains why those colours are as they are. What I'm just after is a really simple thing. I just want a graphic indication of what has changed in those indicators since the last report, so that it draws the busy reader's eye to those where we need to direct our concern. I fully get that the explanation is there for why they are as they are now. What I want to know is, have they got better, worse, or are they the same? And I think, just as the Deputy Leader suggested, an up arrow, down arrow, horizontal line, or something like that would assist.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler.
Well, I was just going to come back to Councillor Wallace's report on the meeting on KPIs, where he pointed out there were 3 areas that there should be perhaps more consideration. One being the economic area that Councillor Bolton was talking about, which I think the report from the meeting was that those are available from external sources and could be reported, but maybe not necessarily in this report, but could be report made widely available, but it's a choice of the Scrutiny Committee if they want to go into more detail on that. The second was on the nature recovery biodiversity indicators, which we know would be difficult to find, but with the development of the nature recovery plan, there may be some come out of that, and that may be some way you wish to explore. And the third one was on planning enforcement, which again, it may be worth exploring. But I think the point that has come out of this is that there are limited resources, so it's really important for this committee to decide on their priorities, and those were the three that came out of that meeting. So I'm just raising that as, you know, sort of, obviously there are limited, probably 2 or 3 that you can do in a year if for there to be enough resources to do it well, and maybe that's the starting point. But obviously it's not my decision, it's yours, and then it comes to cabinet, and we can see if we can agree on them. But that's the process, isn't it? But it's just getting the priorities. That's down to this committee to decide.
Councillor Batho.
Thank you, Chair. I think we just need to bear in mind that the whole reason that we have the report and the KPIs is to ensure that the council is achieving its council plan. That, at the end of the day, is the reason that we are here, is to ensure that the actual plan is achieved, and that if there's any deviation to that, that we're alerted to it, and that we ensure that there are actions taken to restore it back to its status. And I think that we need to make sure that we're not just focusing on the KPIs and worrying about them to the nth degree, because there's an additional one that we want to have in because it meets our particular interests or particular area of concern. So I think we need to make sure that if the council plan is being achieved and the KPIs are doing their work and are doing the work, you know, sort of work of actually achieving that for us, then we don't really need to worry about it. Is where things that were in the council plan that are not being achieved, we want to make sure that there are additional KPIs that then cover those things. So I think we need to make sure that we're not creating more effort when in fact it's not actually going to achieve anything further in terms of actually getting the council plan delivered. I think also we need to understand that scrutiny is not just in isolation. We have 2 other committees, the Economy and Housing and the Health and Environment Policy Committees, which also have their, you know, sort of remit. And I think some of the things, Councillor Bolton, you're referring to might actually be more relevant to be part of those committees. And indeed, there is a meeting, I believe, of the chairs of those committees next week to talk about how we look at it holistically. And if there are things that we as chairs of those 3 committees decide on as being, you know, relevant to actually pursue, that we do it in a coordinated manner rather than this committee, because it's got precedence, taking all the resource from the other 2 committees that might have some admirable objectives to achieve as well. So I think we just need to make sure that we're doing it in a consistent way, and that as Laura was saying, we're using the resource that we have as those committees in the best way possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments on this part? No. The action seems to be talk about this offline, and then we can feed it into the chairs meeting next Wednesday. Are we happy with that? Thank you. In advance of next Wednesday. Okay, so coming on to the report itself, do we have any questions on the report itself? We've set your hand, Councillor Bolt.
I was just going to say, for that meeting, we could really do with Laura being there, if that's at all possible.
You're off your private meeting. Of course, Chair, if that's helpful, then of course Matthew and I will come along, no problem.
Thank you. Any questions on the report itself? Councillor Wallace.
Right, I have got a question, but I wanted to say a few comments first. I was just starting at the beginning on the climate emergency bit. I think, you know, there's some really good stories in here that we need to shout about, actually. The Warmer Homes grant is a great thing. I know there's various residents in my ward who have benefited from the Warmer Homes grant. It is a fantastic thing for people who are in less well insulated homes and are low income to get an opportunity to upgrade their properties. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic grant, and I encourage all members to shout about it as much as possible. There's the My Homes Made Better new scheme, which has started, another fantastic scheme to people just to ring up and get personalised advice about their home. It really should be a really good thing. The local area energy plan. I know.
Sorry, Councillor Wallace, this is debate.
I'm sorry, I'm getting carried away. Right.
We're on questions.
I was enjoying reading this section. Anyhow, questions. So I did have a couple of questions on this. Nutrient mitigation. The report talks about the fact there were 2 pilot plants completed. I wanted to understand if there have been any issues on those. And yeah, okay, well, maybe we'll start with that one. Thank you.
Councillor Cutler.
I will take that question. As far as I know, they've been successfully completed. So there's not been any reports of issues on those, and that programme continues. But I will check, and if there's anything to report, I will make sure it's reported when this report comes to Cabinet.
Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. On page 24, on the carbon targets again, could we have included in the notes here perhaps definitions of what scope 1, scope 2 and so forth is, so in the public domain it's quite clear to everybody what it is we're counting, what we're not counting.
Councillor Cutler, page 24.
Be included in the report. So definitions of the scope 1, 2 and 3.
Councillor Batho.
Yes, can I just go back to page 21, and this is just an example of what I was referring to before. In the future of waste and recycling, last quarter's report was the budget was amber. In this report, it's green, which is actually a positive direction, but it's not then reported on in terms of by concentrating on just the amber and red changes, we actually lose some positive information and positive directions of travel. So I'm just wondering if say we can reflect that as well. And what was the positive budget response that I assume it's to do with the government grants?
New burdens funding details. Yeah. Transitional costs have been received. I think
yes, that's right. Yes,
not shifted it. But yes, I take your point about definition of that.
So yeah, I interpreted that and as being the reason for the positive news. It would just be good to have that identified. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. So I did sort of slip in a question earlier about that timeline on page 19 that's indicated as green, but the narrative in the REG status update seems to suggest that it's not in time frame. So I'd like clarification on that. You want all of them? So then further down that page, second bullet point on progress achieved during the last quarter. Do we do, when Council approved the budget allocation of cover for supply of green energy, gas and electricity in the MTF strategy, I just wondered whether in making the business case to go one or the other, are we also looking at conventional gas and electricity suppliers as opposed to a green supplier. It was because of the phrase has been negotiated in a more competitive rate has been secured, and I wondered whether that is the cheapest available or the cheapest green available. And then on solar PV, there's been a lot of news in the press about the ethics around suppliers, and I wondered whether that's featured in our, because I know it's part of our procurement process, and whether we've hit the any issues with the supply of solar PV because of that. That's enough to be going on with, I think. Thank you.
In terms of the energy, I mean, this is under our carbon neutrality action plan. It will be for securing green energy, and it would have been secured at a more competitive price than we were expecting. I think that's the point there. We have a procurement policy which will include that ethical element, and I would assume that that is being followed for procurement of solar panels, or would be followed during the procurement of solar panels. But again, I can look into more detail on these aspects.
It will be of interest to everybody, I think, if we know that we are, that we are procuring them on that basis.
Yep. Okay. I will try to confirm that, because it is part of our procurement policy, so it should be the approach. Right. Can you remind me of the question on timeline? I'm trying to write them down as I go.
Fair enough. I understand. It was that it's green, and should it really be green when the description implies that it shouldn't be?
I think it's more to do with the fact that the carbon is yellow rather than the timeline, because the timeline is to the end of this year, this financial year, and it's not. We're going to hit the timeline, aren't we, on it? I mean, I think it. Yeah. Yeah.
Just to assist you, yes, as a the timelines that are shown there are showing that activities that need to be done within the overall achievement of the council plan are running to time, that we are on track to meet target on a narrative basis.
Councillor Batho.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go to page, sorry, some of these pages don't have page numbers. It's to do with the page 23, where it says on item 4, deliver programme of retrofit carbon reduction measures to our housing stock, which is indicating green. On page 25, TCE 7 and 8, which are the housing items, are red. So that seems to be inconsistent in terms of reporting.
Me to assist, Chair, just for Councillor.
Yes, please.
So again, the projects on page 23 are from the service plans that, as a bundle, are the ones that have been selected to show progress to meet the climate emergency work. So there is a programme of retrofit carbon measures underway, and it is running to time. It is running through to March 26. When you then look at the detail, as you've quite right pointed out, Councillor, we're behind on installation. So, but at the moment, we've got an optimism bias that we're going to pick it up. You know, we could, if you wish, show it amber now, because that's closer to a red here. But you are quite right. The delivery at the moment is showing red because we are behind target. But as an overall assessment, the officer team believe that we are on track to deliver the council plan objective. But we could be more cautious and pessimistic in that if we wished, and clearly we would discuss that with the cabinet member concerned. So that's jointly owned housing and of course climate. It's a fair bit, it's a fair.
Councillor Wallace, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Clew.
So two of the metrics that didn't look so good on the climate emergency side are the EV strategy. It's behind schedule, and this was a big part of the council's plans for reducing emissions in our area. So could you comment on that, please? And also on the metrics TCE6, the corporate buildings gas, which has dropped, but at the current rate, it will not be anywhere near achieving our goals. So on those two, can you? So TCE6 is on. Just light it on. 25, page 25, and the EV strategy is on page 23. There's a comment at the bottom saying it's going to be carried forward on the EV strategy. On the energy and the gas, there's just it's just not dropping very fast. So are we concerned about hitting our targets for both of those, please?
Just while the cabinet members are just reviewing, clearly on the EV strategy, so obviously we haven't been able to deliver that for April 25, and as the note says, Councillor Wallace, we've carried that forward into the service plans 25-26. We can get an update on delivery of that plan for the committee. That is not a problem.
This figure is a measure only, and it is clearly very much weather related rather than climate related as to what the usage would be, because the gas is for heating. And as I say, it's in there as a measure only. It should fall, and it has fallen against quarter four 23-24, but you know, it's weather, isn't it? Yeah, but I mean, are we going to not heat the buildings? You know, we're not moving to, we haven't put air source heat pumps in our corporate buildings. We've switched to green gas, and we are trying to reduce consumption. We've stopped heating at weekends and things, and that sort of side of things. But there is a limit to how far you can go, and it will be very much weather based.
Councillor Clew.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just querying page 25, retrofit. Obviously, it's in the red there. Not moving forward as quickly as perhaps it should. That would be my query. Is it because tenants do not wish? Because I know it's an upheaval for tenants. Do they not wish to accept the work? But it's the only area where the status is red, which is of a concern, and not sure, do we take a tougher approach or what? But I really do query that at this present time. Thank you.
Councillor Reach.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's one of the first things that I asked about when I got this job 4 weeks ago. I think there's a number of things going on. First, this is about making sure that tenants have quality houses that are warm and all of that kind of stuff, well insulated and the like. We also have a hard target in 2030 of hitting EPC standard C, which is quite tricky. That is certainly for some of our older properties, that's quite hard. Certainly for my home, that's difficult. What we've done so far is there's been an element of low-hanging fruit, so houses that have been easy to do, we've done them, and we've been able to do them quite quickly. One of the challenges that I've taken back to officers is whether or not we should be over programming. So that is where we know that we might program in 300 retrofits for the year, but we get out there and we find out, well, that's not quite how we found what we expected to find when we get to tenant's property. So we underperform. Now, there are complications with that around accounting and finance and all that kind of important stuff, but that's a conversation that's still ongoing. The really key thing here is to have regular dialogue with tenants to make sure that tenants understand what it is we're trying to do here, why it's a good thing, and also some of those trickier conversations which we have struggled with in the past around, unfortunately, if we're going to lag and insulate your lofts to the correct depth of insulation, you can't use that space for storage. So making it clear to tenants what can and can't be done in their homes. As to whether it's people refuse nicks, I don't think that's what's driving this. I'll keep asking. I think it's that point about we've done the low hanging fruit. These are getting progressively more and more difficult. There'll be a paper that bring it to cabinet later this summer around an approach for solar, battery, and other parts of the retrofit scheme. And I'll happily talk to you at length offline, or indeed any member of the committee, if that would be helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really encouraged to hear what Councillor Reach has just said. I had a shudder going down me when the Chief Executive mentioned the word optimism bias. Having spent too many years in defence procurement, optimism bias was something one came to fear. Because of that, I think it's utterly sensible to over-program in this area and take some financial risk as well. But I think because of the need to do that, and we haven't done it yet, the notion that that programme is green over the long term, I would really question.
Councillor Reach.
Yeah, I mean, I think we agreed that should be looked at, and I'm sure Councillor Reach will take that one back. I do think, and because Councillor Reach has been in the role for a very short time, one of the elements was the time that some of the retrofitting on the Swedish cottages, which was, very much a lessons learned element, but that has slowed up the programme this year, and I think there may be, some, because of part of this process with retrofit, you move into different types of buildings. It slows up again as people learn how to do them, because we don't actually have those skills aren't necessarily there. So hopefully it will pick up. But as Councillor Rich said, he will investigate as to whether it's over programmed and whether that should be amber probably for next year, and we're being overly optimistic.
Councillor Wallace. Councillor Batho.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back actually to Councillor Wallace's question around the gas. I know from the information that's reported there that includes the council offices, the Guildhall, and so just wondered, I know there's a further point later in the report regarding the Guildhall. Do we have a breakdown of that consumption across those two buildings? Because obviously there might be a significant difference between, or the reductions that have been possible to be made in the council buildings, but not possibly in the Guildhall. Is that something that we could sort of have, not necessarily here, but some further detail on?
I'm sure the information is now available. I think there was a time when it wouldn't have been, but with our energy manager who has secured significant savings in energy, I'm sure he's very much on top of that, and that information could be available. Yeah, I mean, clearly, we had the new windows in the new council office, in the council offices, which should have reduced consumption, but somewhere like the Guildhall is so entirely weather dependent, we haven't secured it quite so well.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah, again, Councillor Cutler, is that possibly the good work that we are doing in terms of making reductions in areas that we can is being masked by the fact that it's lumped in with an asset that unfortunately doesn't have the same opportunities for retrofit.
Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. So may I clarify, the committee is asking for the gas and electricity usage to be broken down to two separate figures, one which is whole of city offices and one which is whole of Guildhall, West Wing, and then that includes the university in that bit. So you want two metrics. We can do it like that because the metering allows us to do two main buildings. Is that what you'd like?
I was only suggesting that in terms of seeing benefits that we've, as Councillor Cutler says, we've invested in
Sure.
in double glazing in the council offices, and that hopefully will have made a difference. So also, I'm just thinking that we've got a further conversation, or there's further in the report, is about the future of the Guildhall, and actually having that information that's separated out would actually be a beneficial input to a discussion about the Guildhall and you know that sort of topic. So
it's absolutely. I can see Councillor Cutler. It's absolutely not a problem. We have 2 meters. I can check, but we can put in 2 lines. I'm just checking, so I take away an action as opposed to a discussion. Or do you not wish me to do that?
But the actual information that the Councillor Buffer is asking for is actually the change in usage in the city, in the offices, based on the fact we put double glazing in, and new windows in. So that's actually, but it may have bolted, but it may be also one-off information that is useful to see.
But as you say, it's also weather dependent.
Again, so it's very, very difficult to make it a valid comparison, but unless there's a long-term trend that keeps it down below a figure that was stupidly high in the past, we don't know. So it may be worth looking at it, but again, we'll explore it and see what's most useful.
But going forward, do you wish me to break the numbers out? Thank you. I have to say, Councillor Cutler, I think it is highly unlikely we have figures from pre the windows broken down by 2 sets of meters to today. So we can check, but if we can't find it in half an hour, then I don't think we're going to have it, but we'll have a look. But I'm very happy to break those down to our 2 main building blocks there, when you can look at that going forward. We'll have a look to see what we've got.
Councillor Lamy.
There is one small problem that you might encounter, Councillor Cutler, that we've got solar panels on the roof of the offices which are feeding in power to the offices. So therefore, that's going to give you a problem on usage.
We were only looking at gas.
Sorry?
We're only looking at gas.
Yeah, I'm looking at electricity as well.
You know, the solar panels are only providing electricity. So it's...
Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I had a slightly different question, but it's in kind of this area. It's not in the report, but there was obviously a story recently about Winchester Council contractors cutting back bushes, hedges, and trees during the nesting season. This is Scrutiny Committee, so I'm trying to scrutinise. So I know that one. You might not be able to answer that because, but could you explain what happened there, please?
I think Councillor Reach has
well, I'm aware of the. If you're happy for me to take the question, I mean, I'm aware of what you're referring to. I believe it was the north side of the Winchester town that some of our contractors went out and cut back hedge. I was told earlier today it was completely consistent with our policy, and they did check that there were no nesting birds in that hedge at the time, and that they've taken records to demonstrate that that was the case. Obviously, this has a bit outside my brief, but I'm aware of the interest that that's caused, particularly in the town, and I think it's probably a question for Councillor Lerney, perhaps, but we can take that away and get the full brief.
No concerns have been expressed to me by ornithologists, amongst others, that they think it would be highly unlikely that at this time of year there weren't birds nesting in some of those bushes and trees that were cut back. So it just seems, yeah, it doesn't quite add up. So perhaps I know I'm putting you. It's not fair to put you on the spot for this right here, but it might be a question that you want to follow up on the cabinet, perhaps.
Yeah, it's a question that we'll answer. It doesn't relate to this paper in the slightest, but yeah.
Do we have any other questions on the climate piece, Councillor Ling?
Page 30, if I may, you've got down the Winchester Sports and Leisure Park. You've got a target figure for the 24-25 year. How does that relate to the business plan that was put forward for this in the first place?
Councillor Cutler?
So which line were you referring to? Sorry. Yeah. I would imagine, and again, I can't be sure, so it would be something I'd need to take away to check, that the target will be set around the business plan target of the expected visitors. I mean, it would be struck me as fairly sensible that you'd be setting your target around the original plan of what you'd be expecting. And as you can see from these, it's clear that we've exceeded that target.
Yeah, I'm pleased about that.
So while we've moved on to section 2, living well, do we have any questions on this piece?
Sorry, I'm just hesitating because I haven't found it on the page, but in my notes, I was going to ask about the delay to the community and wellbeing strategy.
It's a question I can take to Councillor Becker, but I do not have the answer.
Councillor Wallace.
I think I've been sitting on this committee 2 years now. Is there a reason why we've got so few cabinet members and officers here tonight? Because in the whole time I've been here, this is probably the least supported meeting we've had. And I know one of our cabinet members we've got attending has only been a cabinet member for a month. So is there a reason why we've got such little support today?
No specific reason. There is one paper with my name on it, on this committee, and I answer questions on the performance papers. So I know Councillor Todd has had a very, very busy week and was unable to make it tonight.
Okay, section 3.
Which is such a great.
Yeah. Councillor Wallace.
Right. Yeah. Homes for all. My question here: we've obviously had some issues with the housing regulator recently. Why didn't we see this coming?
Well, so could you specify your question a bit more? Do you want a broader answer? What in particular did we not see coming? What would you like to know about? I can do my best to answer.
Well, clearly, we've had to completely redo how we're contracting some of our housing services based on some of the findings from the housing regulator. So it was a significant change that was made following the feedback from the housing regulator. Now, we are meant to be here. Our job here at Scrutiny is to scrutinise and try and identify things that perhaps get missed elsewhere. And it's, you know, it's clearly, you know, if the cabinet's seen this, if the officers seen this coming, we'd have done something differently. And perhaps, you know, what are we doing wrong here at Scrutiny that we didn't see it coming either?
I think that in answer to your question, I mean, I can answer part of it. Obviously, the question around scrutiny, I guess, is for the committee. I think we did see it coming. We were aware that social housing regulator was coming along. The legislation had been on the statute books for some time, so we self-referred. We knew we wanted to improve. We knew we weren't going to reach the standards they expected from the outset, so we went proactively and said, could we have a conversation? Can we sit down with you, talk through this and work out a plan, an action plan to get us to the level of compliance we need to be at? I understand we're one of only a handful of local authorities who did that. A number of others sort of, stuck their heads in their sand and waited for the regulator to come to them. We're now having regular meetings with the regulator so that we can brief them on our progress, that they can challenge us to make sure we are delivering what they want to see, and particularly around compliance, around some of the information that's in this paper around asbestos and fire safety and the like. So I slightly dispute that we corporately didn't see it coming because we self-referred when we knew it was. As to whether scrutiny could have done something different to see that coming, I can't really answer that.
And I'd just like to add that it was more than just the self-referral. We, as a council, commissioned consultants to look at our compliance. And when that report came back and said that because of the change of rules, and I think we do need to recognise here, I'm not underplaying the importance of complying, but in many of these cases it was the safety checks had been done, but what we hadn't done was check that the people doing the safety checks, it's like checking the inspectors element of things, which came in as part of those rules. So there were one or two elements, a complete new regime. Now I've experienced that over the years with, sort of you change farm assurance schemes or whatever, and getting all your paperwork in line to comply takes a bit of time. That's why this council proactively got consultants in to look at it. When the consultant said you haven't complied, we self-referred on the basis of making sure we got the advice. We had the choice. We could have worked on it quietly ourselves and waited for an inspection, or we could take that proactive approach, and we took the proactive approach. So I don't think it was not seeing it coming. It may be of not recognizing the depths of the change that was required within that, but I wouldn't characterize it that we didn't see it coming.
There is, it appears to have had a big effect on how we contract our housing services. That's changed quite significantly. So when you describe it like that, it sounds like, oh, it was very minor. But actually, my understanding is we've changed, how we contract that housing services, which is the biggest one of the biggest contracts, if not the biggest contract that this council does. It changed the structure. There is of how we do that. So it seems to have had a big impact.
And that was one of the reasons that we undertook the assessment in the first place, and to recognise that this different regulatory regime did require a different approach. And because the contract was at a point of re-tendering, it was sensible to say, is there a better way of doing this that will ensure compliance in the future? And that's why it's created the major changes in the contract process.
And I would just add to what Councillor Cutler said. I think that the key metric, when we've been having a lot of discussion, or the committee's been discussing KPIs this evening, is around tenant satisfaction. Certainly the introduction of a social housing regulator and the associated compliance activities drives a whole load of additional work that perhaps we weren't doing before. We'll have to go back and look through the data, but I don't think that was tenants were necessarily less satisfied with their homes because we hadn't been doing this compliance work quite to the degree that we were expected to. That for me is the metric I think is really important, that people are happy in the homes and that the service they are provided by their landlord, Winchester City Council. I can talk in immense detail, probably offline with you about this, but it's certainly something, as I say, we're meeting with the regulator on a monthly basis now, so this will be an emerging picture.
Councillor Bathurst.
Yes, just to also input as the chair of the Economy and Housing, the pre-work for the contract that Councillor Wallace referred to in terms of the maintenance came through the policy committee last year. And I understand that part of the issue was that now, obviously, with LGR, with local government reorganisation, the impact or the possibility of having a large contract like that was then deemed not to be sort of inappropriate, given that we might then have to withdraw from that. So I think there's an opportunity, as Councillor Cutler was saying, of actually redirecting the resources and using smaller and more specific contracts to address these areas, rather than having a large contract that then has committed the council and then indeed any subsequent unitary authority that might take over from us to a contract that might then not be suitable for that changed authority. So I think it's not just in terms of the social housing regulator, it's also wider than that in terms of other impacts on the council from outside. Thank you.
Obviously, this is, well, there's the biggest, I think it's the biggest contract we place. Does it, or one of the biggest, did all the changes go back through the Economy and Housing Policy Committee?
We have had some of the implications come back, and certainly there was a report at the last meeting in terms of the work that's being done to respond to the social housing referral. So yes, some of that has come back through the committee.
Yeah, but my understanding is the actual contract and how it was structured did not go back through the committee. It went straight to cabinet, so it hasn't been through scrutiny, the new contract.
Just have to refer back to the terms of reference for the policy committee. It is, as it says, it's a policy committee, not in terms of operational implementation. So it was being brought to the policy committee when it was in its larger form as a general concept, and for the committee to reflect on whether it was the right direction. And the question being asked by officers was how much of what the council does in terms of maintenance and retrofit should be included in that contract. So it was really coming to the policy committee as a commentary and a sort of feedback in terms of operational decisions. Then that doesn't then necessarily come back to the policy committee. That then goes through to cabinet, as my understanding in terms of the committee that I've chaired for 2 years. Thank you.
Councillor Clare.
It's not actually a question, Chair, it's just an observation, and I'd just like to say I'm pleased to see that the final vacant Venter living apartment and all the units are taken up now, so which supports many key workers, I know. So perhaps there is a question, will there be more later on? But I'm just saying, no question really, just pleased to see they're all taken up now.
Do we have any other questions on Homes for All? No? Okay, we'll come on to vibrant local economy then. Councillor Basso.
Sorry, Chair, just going back to the Homes for All, there was just a question I had in terms of the homelessness and voids. There's just a commentary in there about changing, so I'll go back to it because it's changing customer demographics, housing preferences, and improving the quality of the voids work. I just wondered if the cabinet member could give some commentary on those 3 items, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so on voids performance, we haven't hit our target. I think I can say that we're 6 days behind where we should be. When it comes to voids, there's a much bigger piece that I'm just starting to get my head around and get involved and ask officers about. And I'm quite happy to front up if we need to come back and change the approach when it comes to voids. I have a concern that a voids target, which is very tight, is driving a quick rush job, get in there, get the place turned around. Now, of course, no one wants voids. It adds cost to the HRA. There's council tax implications and the like. But if there's an opportunity to do remedial works or indeed retrofit works at the same time, that would be a lot more efficient than doing a very quick job and turning around a void property more quickly. So it's something I'm going to be challenging over the coming months to see whether that measure is correct, whether that target is correct, or whether there is a more efficient approach to how we deal with void properties. And then, sorry, your other question.
Sorry, the second was regarding homelessness. It refers to reduction in stage 1 accommodation, and I just was wondering whether that was the Hampshire County Council buildings that have obviously now been closed. And also, I attended the homelessness meeting yesterday afternoon, and the last point in that, it refers to suitable accommodation, particularly 1-bedroom accommodation, and I certainly think that from a housing strategy point of view seems to be an area that we need to potentially focus on. So really that in terms of a comment, but yes, that I think we just need to keep an eye on that area of so yes, we just whether that stage 1 accommodation, was that the Hampshire County Council buildings that have closed?
It may well be. I'll have to come back to you. I'll have to come back to the committee.
Councillor Bolton.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I had a question on that point as well, because obviously we've talked about that at previous scrutiny meetings, and the answer that Councillor Westwood gave me before was actually that there are a handful of individuals within the district that are, I don't know what they're, notorious is probably the wrong word, for their refusal to accept any help. Now, he said it's a very complex picture of mental illness and other things that lead some people to have issue with accepting any accommodation, and they remain tricky, those last few, to even assist to get them off the streets and into accommodation. And so when I saw that, I thought, oh, have things changed, or is that still the problem that we face? And we are talking about literally a handful, aren't we?
And I think the council do good work with partners to identify those people. I think we know who they are. I think, yes, there are a number of people who, shall we say, are place high demands on the service. One of the first meetings I had was with Trinity in Winchester, hearing about the good work they do to avoid people, particularly working with people who've recently come out of prison, to make sure that they don't spend that first night on the street, and in fact we can get a roof over their head as soon as possible. It is a really complex picture, and again, I'll have to come back to you, but it could well be that as well.
Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just come to page 41, bottom, Guildhall? I'm back on the Guildhall again. I realise money is a big factor in this, but may I ask, is it possible to have some sort of paper produced on the strategy, read the Guildhall, and perhaps that could even be taken to one of the committees like economy and housing, because I'd like to know what is the objective we are trying to achieve. There's this beautiful building, I love it, and I'd like to see it stay lovely, but I'm not quite sure what the objective is that we're trying to achieve at the present time. Thank you.
The strategy at the moment, or the pre-strategy, I suppose, is having the condition survey and the market assessments to see what the options are. So I think it would be premature before we have the condition surveys and we've had this market assessment to, we need that information to base any future approach on it. you know, there's both from the point of view of Abbey House and the Guildhall, and that's, and of course the other factor around there is around local government reorganisation as well, in terms of they could be ridiculously burdensome assets to a town council, and at the same time a large unitary might not be interested in them. So it's important that we get this process underway and we find a solution. But I think it's premature to, there will be, once the market assessment is undertaken and the absolute costs in terms of refurbishment, the level of refurbishment required, the two things are hand in hand. You know, the market assessment is what options are there. You know, for example, Portsmouth Guildhall is now run by a trust, but would a trust be able to take it on in its current condition, or do we need to spend a lot of money on it to get to that stage? What are the other options in terms of operating it, and where the ownership lies? And that applies to both buildings. So until those assessments and the condition surveys are complete, and we can see what the budget is, it's very difficult to provide the choices. You know, there could be a huge amount of expenditure on this building required. It may be less than we assess, but you know, it's going to be a lot, and you can't really make the decisions about how it is then used until we've reached that stage. So that'll come this summer, and I think by the autumn we will be in a position to have a discussion about what the options are for both buildings.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to vibrant local economy now. Were there any questions on that section? No. Councillor Bolton.
Reflecting on what you were just saying, and the issues that have you know, mayoral properties and the considerations of LGR. I'm interested to understand this sort of hinterland that we're in as with regard to LGR. In what other ways is it impacting how we get on with stuff as a council? Because I remember you saying to me, or you said at the last council meeting, in fact, about the impact that LGR's having on updating computer systems and spending, you know, pumping capital into projects like that when there's so much uncertainty. And it strikes me that this is probably a really big problem, and I wonder how we get visibility on where this is punching us.
Yes, I think that's something that the Chief Executive probably, as the picture becomes clearer, the work streams are developing about, you know, likely partners, understanding their systems, understanding how we approach things from now on, based on where things might go. But that's quite a major piece of work that is being undertaken by the TC25 team up to a point, and that's critical. And I think what you're referring to is the point that, and it's further through this paper about the position of TC25. Clearly, we have a very good transformation team who have been, I'm not saying diverted from TC25, but their additional workload is now looking at some of those aspects about how we'd merge with other authorities. But of course, that also feeds back into the decisions we take in terms of that longer term investment that we talked about, in terms of particularly major investment in digital systems. But at the same time, we are still In fact, we had a very good update this afternoon on the digital programme as to what we can do, and that will not impact, will improve efficiency, improve our customer service, and the areas where we need to look at what our potential partners may be doing and scoping out where that investment may be, where we sort of mutually have a mutual approach. So that's a big, it is having an effect. And similarly, obviously the whole Guildhall and those assets discussions are going on. I think it's difficult to give a broader briefing, and the chief executive may have a view on this as well, but giving a broader briefing on that detail when we're still in the position of negotiating a position in terms of LGR going forward. And that in itself is complex enough because it is involving quite a lot of analysis of where services will be. And so until a submission goes in, which may clarify where we're likely to be, or until a response to submission by the end of the year, we can't, a lot of this is preparing the information that we will need to have in order to make the decisions. Now that we are determined will not impact on services, but it does impact on resources within the council. But that's I know it's broader than this. You know, this performance paper, but a useful discussion to have at some point. I'm sure Scrutiny will need to return to that aspect of things.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Anything else on the vibrant local economy? I'm aware we strayed off topic then, but it was an important point to discuss. Your services, your voice. Any questions on that? Regen and growth. Do we have any questions on the regen and growth piece? CWR? Local plan? Station approach? And the movement strategy? No. Okay, do we have any debate on this paper, please? I think we've had quite a lot of discussion on this one. Okay, so thank you for your engagement on this one. The points I've taken up the meeting in advance of the Scrutiny Chairs meeting to discuss what we want to achieve from scrutiny in the policy committees and take the holistic view. Include definitions of scope 1, 2 and 3 on page 24. Separate out gas numbers for council offices and away from Guildhall, West Wing University, so that will be a separate measure. Look at why the bushes were cut down during bird breeding season, which by the way I think is quite disgusting. And paper on strategy regarding the Guildhall once surveys complete, market assessments done hopefully in the autumn. Councillor Bolton.
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to clarify that the question I asked of Councillor Cutler on the solar PV was that not that clarify that we have the ethical policy, which I know we do. It was whether that was impacting our ability to, do you see what I mean? To actually acquire resources at the price we think we should be acquiring them at. Because my fear was that was introducing a price hike and it's getting out of our, you see what I mean? Anyway, yeah, thank you.
Do you want me to update that to say, are we achieving the price we hoped on solar?
It was more to be clear that it wasn't just clarification of the ethical approach within our contracts. I know that's there, but it was to understand whether that was making acquisition of solar PV to achieve our objectives difficult or expensive, or both.
if that's clear.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Anything else for me to add to this list? No. Councillor Batho.
Sorry, just a clarification in terms of the item on the hedge trimming. Just wondered which aspect of scrutiny that point then is going to be related to. Thank you, Chair.
I guess it will be the environment, because there's also the declaration of the nature emergency. And actually, if we're killing birds, that's completely against that.
A point of order there, Chair. I did raise before when Councillor Wallace asked, we do have records that there weren't any birds nesting in the hedgerow at the time. You said it was, your word used was disgusting as well. I think the thing to be aware of is that this was it's a walking route to a school. Hedgerow was grown out into the road, so children were walking in the road. So there was an imminent danger to the children from being run over. But the point of order is we have records that show there were birds there, and it was a safety incident, a safety issue around children.
Okay, that clarification wasn't given earlier, but obviously we still shouldn't be cutting down any hedgerows during bird breeding season. I understand the safety aspect, but perhaps we should have identified if there was an alternative. Anyway, thank you. I've made a point of all of those notes. Okay, coming on to item 8, appointments to external bodies. So the recommendations that the committee considers appointments to the following external bodies. So the first one, Portsmouth City Council Health Overview and Scrutiny Panel. 1 vacancy, 1 deputy. Do we have any nominations here, please? Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair. I have Councillor Bennett and Deputy Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I think that'll just be passed because there's no point in us nominating. We go through the same pain every year and it's always political. So I guess we just agree that, do we? Agreed. Right. Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. So it normally goes to the chair, which currently is me. And when that changes, it won't be me. And Partnership for South Hampshire Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We've been notified that Councillor Bolton would like to be nominated, I understand, so I strongly nominate you for that. For the push, does anybody else wish to nominate? Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did have Councillor Power and Councillor Batho as deputy.
Okay, so Councillor who, sorry, as the
Councillor Power and Councillor Batho as deputy.
Okay, votes for Councillor Power then. Votes for Councillor Bolton. Any abstentions? Yes. There we go. That was worthwhile, wasn't it? Anyway, right, so that's Councillor Power on that one with the deputy as Councillor Batho, did you say? As deputy, yeah. Okay, item 9, annual scrutiny report. Has everybody read that? Do we have any questions?